Cool. So, Watershed, property, projects, aquatics, and people. More importantly, how did Watershed come about for you? Like, how did you start it? Where did it all start?
I was a property manager, a bit frustrated with the day-to-day grind, and spent 6 months convincing my wife that we could, if I worked as hard for ourselves as we did for my employer, we'd be able to run a good business. Yeah.
Nice.
In 2006.
2006, so that's 16 years ago now. So
yep.
You did the 15th last year. And so what sort of you're doing at the time? What sort of, I guess, motivated you to think, well, I can do this for myself? Like, how did that sort of conversation happen?
Things that I was doing that felt natural and easy, I was being told were exemplars or something that wasn't normal. So I'm somehow naturally quite good at doing planning and procedures and explaining to people step by step how to achieve something. And so that's where the property part first, which is where we started around property management, was this is a task, this is how you do it, these are the steps to getting it right. And from there everything has grown and multiplied.
Yeah, from one, I guess not one little thing, but yeah, like you say, from, I guess, fairly system and process oriented. Would that be fair?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. And so why do you think you're good at that?
I have no idea. It's just, the people who are into star signs would say that's what a Virgo does. It's just something that, it drives my family crazy at the weekends, but it's plan, do, get it done.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And that's and that's one of those things that it becomes a foundation, right? And so your entire business ends up being, that it's built on that essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, and a good example of that is from day one when there was just Wendy, my wife, and a part-timer. We had a annual strategy meeting when there was just the two of us, and we'd go off-site, book a venue for a day and talk about the next year, and it drove Wendy nuts a little bit at the beginning with the why, but we had this year's one last week with 6 of us there, and it's very interesting rereading the minutes about from last year what we were going to do and what we've actually done, and that's just a bigger plan. So it does become part of what you do and why you do it. I guess a trick to that is do things as if you were bigger than you are today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, think big mentality, eh?
Yeah.
Like think, you sort of end up growing into what your thoughts in a way, your thoughts and plans.
Yeah.
And so when you first started out, property management, how did you get into the aquatic side of things?
I've sort of started aquatics on the side. I was doing a bit of contract work on the weekends around my proper job, and was getting more and more of it, and it sort of that opportunity presented itself at about the same time, so it meant that we could have a different income stream and de-risk going to work for ourselves, with some guaranteed work in the background from other clients. So that was it was good timing, but also the need to free up some weekend time. We were travelling all over the country doing tasks.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess that's how that's how we had the the early involvement when I was in the aquatics industry for a little while as well, and we did the water treatment courses and that, and you ended up running those courses, right, eventually.
Yeah.
And then so and then you've gotten into designing pools essentially and working for councils around aquatics and things like that. It's one of those industries that's I guess it's a lot bigger than what it looks like on the outside. Like, you go for a swim in a pool, you don't really think about what happens in behind that.
Yeah, what we do is very niche, but it's also bigger than, as you say, bigger than you'd expect. Which is why we work for a lot of clients across the country, because we do bring something unique to that table. We're not trying to necessarily sell them something, we're trying to come up with a solution, and often that leads to the next bit of work. We do a lot of feasibility studies and facility reviews, structural reviews of staffing, and particularly where they're council-run facilities, where it's easy for the facility to add people or add roles without critically reviewing it very often. So that's where we often get brought in there.
Did you find when you started in the aquatics side of things, did you find there was a real sort of lack of either expertise or knowledge around those facilities? especially with regards to like water quality, water treatment?
Probably more of a gap in there than there is now, but that's the industry maturing. The gap that we sort of filled was around where the knowledge sat. So not just in the provider who would sell their services to a council or to a pool owner. It was more coming in independently and being able to offer something. Yeah.
So I guess more relative to what we do with building and facility management, you guys have been involved, Watershed as a consultant, project manager, etc., for a number of like leaky building remediations. So without naming names of buildings and things like that, because that can be a bit touchy at times, talk us through, how you guys got involved in that space, and and what it takes essentially to remediate a leaky building, because it's a major, right? It's a major money, big dollars.
Yeah, big dollars. I think the first question there around how we got into it, as project managers, we typically work with public money, so schools and councils primarily, and we've been asked to propose or put a tender in for managing remediation projects, and essentially the process is the same for every project. It's just how you address the issue and the client. The biggest challenge with remediation projects for body corps in particular is you're not dealing with one client. The body corp is the client, but you're dealing with every owner who's dealing with their home and the emotion and the stress and the decision making around that. And that's probably the biggest change for us, is who the client is and how we view them. Very not dissimilar to a school, where the school might be the client, but we're actually dealing with the maths department or the English teachers or whatever it might be about what it is their end use might be or what they want in their spaces. So the body corp challenge is really around multiple owners, multiple clients who have an expectation, not necessarily wrong, that we're there for them, and it's their home, it's their private money, it's a big deal for them, and their lives are disrupted for a few years, and what they read about elsewhere doesn't help their perception of what's about to happen to them.
Yeah, because there's a lot of remediations out there that don't go right the first time. We've seen a few of them with buildings that we've managed before, and because people kind of automatically think that when it's being remediated, all the problems are going to go away, and quite often if the job's not done properly, you end up possibly worse, or in a different space. It's not actually it hasn't solved their problem.
Yeah, I look, from the few that we've done and the ones we're working on, I think critically it's important to be honest about what might happen. And I think a lot of projects get undone by the promise of it only costing X amount, but it's actually double. But you told me this is the line that comes back. So we've taken a real honest approach, which sometimes means we don't win a job, but if that's okay by me, we need to be together for a long time, and we need to be honest from the start. Being dishonest or not as upfront as you should be just to win the work won't help anyone in the long run.
And I guess unfortunately there's going to be a lot more of these projects out there. Do you see any others on the horizon that you're tendering for at the moment?
Yeah, and the biggest there's heaps, but the biggest problem is the way, I'm no body corp expert, but the way they're run, the way they're organised, the way voting works, the longer it takes, the more it's going to cost. We're working on some that have been a number of years in gestation, and they are paying the price for that.
And I guess the unfortunately all the lawyers and different consultants that end up winning, but sometimes even before the actual building gets remediated.
I think the problem there, and this is what we try to educate the owners, is that some of those costs you can't get away from. You can't not have a quantity survey, you can't not have a building surveyor, you can't not have an architect and just pay a builder and hope for the best. It's that misinformation is really harmful and slows things down, because what we've found is a few owners understand and accept that, and a number always don't.
You probably get the more commercially minded owners who live in a building like that. They might be a bit more. They might have their own business, or they just understand the commercial realities of a project like that.
Yeah.
Whereas you might have someone who's I don't know, nurse or a teacher or
Yep.
that.
Particularly around, they want to do up their bathroom at the same time and wonder why it costs double what they thought it would.
Yeah.
It's because we've got to do it properly, and we've got to do the membrane underneath the tiles, and it's not just a coat of paint. So yeah, there's a fair bit of that.
So from say start of your involvement to the finish, what's a typical project look like for you from say in a remediation? At what point are you engaged, and then at what point is it sort of end game for you guys?
In an ideal world, will be the first engagement.
Yeah.
Usually we're near last, which means that we're sort of lumped with what an architect may or may not have done, conversations they've had in the past, and an expectation around cost. Again, I go back to being honest. When I'm interviewed, typically it's me for to win a job. I'm saying what I think it will cost, and then they've already got an estimate from their architect, and I'm usually right. And then, so that could be anywhere from 1 to 2 years, depending on the scale, for that end of design. We'll typically be brought in around detailed design all the way through to getting it consented and tendering. Then there's the construction period, and then we're up to a year after that. And again, that goes back to what we're charging for. It doesn't finish the day they get the key back. For us, we've got a fair bit to carry on doing, whether it's around code compliance or defects period, releasing retentions, being accessible for the next year. Quite a lot goes on after people have moved back.
And is every contract that you do in that space different, or do you guys basically just say this is how we work, or do some people say, well, we do that part and we do this part, but we'll get someone else to do that part? Is it the same every time for you guys?
They're all based similarly, but they're all different. More so now with supply chain challenges, the lack of workers in terms of the ability to get contractors or subcontractors. There's a bit more negotiation directly with a preferred supplier now than going to tender, because you just can't get tenders. A good example is we used to blankly refuse off-site payments or deposits. It's not our job to finance the contractor. Lately, to make sure that we get the material and the price isn't going to change, we've paid deposits. We've rented premises to act as a warehouse for the materials for the job, to make sure that, and that's a project cost, but the argument being that it guarantees the project cost overall. For example, let's pay 50 grand to rent this warehouse and make sure we don't get any price risk and buy the materials and store them, versus the unknown risk that it might go up by 200,000.
That's quite interesting. That seems quite innovative to me. Do other project managers do that, or it sounds like that you guys have sort of got that's a really smart way to do it. Like you say, you guarantee things, certain aspects of it.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's doing it, but we certainly we looked at it. We had two separate projects that were running concurrently at the same stage, and they're actually sharing the cost of the warehouse, and they know that, and so it worked for everybody. And all it does is throw a little bit of complexity around insurance and payment claims, but the surety that it gives you for cost escalation is worth it. Yep.
No, that's cool. I've never heard of that happening before.
It's very much against the normal way of doing project management and getting a project done.
That's actually quite a good point to make. So do you think you guys are actually innovative thinking within that sort of environment? Because one of the other things I was going to ask you about is what's the future like for that project management environment? Is there different things that are going to happen, or can you is there things that you can do differently? I mean, you guys are already starting to do things differently by the sound of it.
I think the biggest challenge for us is convincing people they need us, and we're in an industry, a number of industries actually, where they don't realise what we're doing until it's not being done. And if you're doing a good job project managing, you won't be able to notice that they're doing their job as project managers. So in terms of that innovation, it's what can we do to, every project manager says on time, on budget. Those are usually out of the project manager's control, and COVID has shown that with lots of sickness and absenteeism. So what we can control, we should try to, and that's probably the mantra we try to work to in that sense. Yeah.
Because when you compete for work around the entire country, right? So you're always
to a point.
So do you find that there's differences in different parts of the country where you're tendering against similar services or similar project managers, do they have different capabilities, or is Auckland do we have the best project managers in Auckland, or is it around the main centres? Or
no, I think the challenge elsewhere outside of Auckland and the main centres is parochialism, and procurement rules don't help that. There's a lot of procurement rules around local, regional, national steps for procurement, particularly with public money. So that's a challenge. But it's really about being time in the business and having a good reputation and getting stuff done.
Oh yeah, reputation's everything, right? Yeah, and that's why you get asked to tender for a lot of not repeat work, but you get into these schools and things like that, and your name keeps popping up, and they keep asking you back for things.
Yeah.
And I think your business has evolved over the years with a, like you say, you start off in property and aquatics, but then you've also got a lot of other things going on as well. Do you find there's a lot of crossover with the various things that you're in, with the various industries that you're in?
With our clients? Yeah, oh, very much so. I mean, a number of our clients use every one of our services.
Wow, yeah, that's cool.
Which is great. They're great clients, and we support them in return. And that's the ideal world. There's no point. So we've got clients. We manage their property, we deliver their projects, we do their cleaning, and we support their aquatics provision, whether it's a school pool or a council facility. So that diversity works really well.
So I guess the big thing that's happened over the last couple of years with COVID, sort of shutting down the country essentially. How did that affect your guys' operation with Watershed?
Because we have a big on-site component as much as an office component, it obviously impacted the on-site significantly. We made a commitment to the outset to pay all of our staff 100%, and the government support package helped that, and obviously we kept people employed. We are suffering the same as everyone else at the moment out the back end in terms of the number of people that have a job or don't want a job. The biggest challenge for us while we're locked down was keeping the wheels moving, particularly in terms of the paperwork and documentation for projects. With no one on site, there's a real risk that it all just stopped. Where that's backfired a little bit is we got ahead of the game in a lot of aspects of a project, and now we're struggling to deliver them. And the struggling is around the contractors and the suppliers and everything else. So that, I think, was a real unpredictable outcome or unforeseen outcome. If the supply issues hadn't occurred, we'd just be flat out busy. But it's on a bit of an even keel. But we got ahead of ourselves trying to keep the wheels moving for our clients and for our people. Yeah.
And so, did you find that COVID time was a fair bit of, downtime? Did you find that there was a good time to have a look back in your business and see, can you be working differently, or did any sort of innovative thinking come out of that time?
We reviewed a lot of. We took the opportunity. A couple of things. We allowed people, whilst they were on full pay and on lockdown, we had a 9-to-1 workday. Personally, I can't sit at the kitchen table for 8 hours, so how could I make everyone else? Yeah. So we had an expectation that you work 9-to-1 and were available. After that, it was up to you, and that worked really well. But at that time, we looked at the structures we had in place, which did lead to some restructuring. We looked at a number of things we were doing, and also what opportunities there might be in the future, because we had the time to do it. The phone wasn't ringing that much. We had just people with a bit of time up their sleeves. So we really did a fair bit of that. The biggest change for us has been around flexible work and all the noise around that. Just prior to lockdown, we were starting to trial a 4-day work week. That obviously stopped, and then by the time we went back to work, we figured the optics of that weren't great. So we then aimed at a 2-1-2, which is 2 days in the office, Wednesday everyone, and then flip over the last 2 days of the week away, work from home. That became a little bit challenging in terms of what a Wednesday looked like. It was just a big social catch-up and wasn't quite right. So over the next lockdown, we developed what we've called individual work methods, which was you tell us which 1 or 2 days you can work from home. We still want everyone in the office on a Wednesday, otherwise we lose all our culture and team environment.
Plus, you've just got a big new office around the
yes,
corner.
well, there is that. Yeah, that was, that's in the anticipation of growth.
Yeah.
That's that planning part.
Yeah.
And IWM seems to be working well, and we have a few rules in place around it, and we want monthly feedback formally on a survey, if you like. How's the time being used? What's working for you? What's not? How do you find the office when other people aren't here? Is it really quiet? What does it feel like? I guess that's the biggest shift, where we were originally being quite innovative in adopting the 4-day week. Now it's people's expectation, which I quite support. The IWN concept was what I threw to our exec team to think about how we could work it out. How everyone picks up, I think, is yet to be worked through on an individual level. It's not for everyone.
Yeah, and it's surprising how quickly that became an expectation. It sounds like you talked to a few other businesses and industries where the work from home thing was introduced, and even the 4-day working week. And man, it was amazing how quickly it just became either part and parcel or an expectation of what they did, rightly or wrongly. But it looks like it's kind of here to stay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it if you can get your head around working from home. And the critical thing for us right from the beginning of our 4-day week trial was the client shouldn't notice. If the client notices, we're not doing it right. It's not a day off, and we've had to really make sure our language is around that. It's not in our, what are you doing when you're away? You're not away, you're working somewhere differently. You're not on holiday, you're not on leave, you're working somewhere else.
Yeah, and I guess you don't want, there's temptation for that Tuesday to turn into a Friday from a social point of view. I got tomorrow off. Yeah, no worries.
That's right. And very much like when you run a 7-day-a-week business, the weekend shouldn't be part of the conversation. It's Saturday and Sunday. It's not the weekend. Your weekend might be Wednesday and Thursday. Yeah. So that's a real, just a language and mental shift, which I think we'll get to.
Yeah. So what are the things that you enjoy about the industries that you're in? Like, what sort of makes you go, shit, I'm glad I do this?
I think inherently our team are problem solvers. Whether that problem is a people one or a property one. This has happened. It's urgent. It's an emergency. It's important to me. What are you going to do about it? That part of it is good, and I think that's what people like generally in project and property management. For me, I like the variety. I had to show my 12-year-old, had to show Jack what a day looks like, because he told somebody that he wanted to do Dad's job, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "You're a project manager." I said, "What does that mean?" And so variety I like from.
So what did he actually like? What did he actually think that you did? That's quite an interesting thing.
That I managed projects, and that was it.
That was it.
And and I did pools.
Right.
That was his answer. So I sort of had to talk about how people get paid, and the tax and running multiple vehicles and premises and things
getting
like
new business and sales and all that sort of thing.
And I had to find a couple of days in my calendar and said, look, first meeting at 7:30 a.m, last meeting at 6:30 p.m. on this day, and 5 different things in between time.
Anything else that you enjoy? There must be more.
Oh, look, there's a lot of interacting with people, and the plus people on our logo.
That's the plus people,
we added that. That's about our people and the people we work with, and we added that after the first COVID, the first lockdown, because we realised and we were hearing how some other organisations treated their people pretty shit. Excuse the language, and that stunned me. People needed to leave on the day that we were going into lockdown, confident they'd have a job and they'd pay the mortgage or the rent next week, and they had something on the horizon. And the stories we were hearing when we came back, and I said, you know what, this is all just the tagline prior to adding plus people was about non-emotional, hard, just solid things, very tangible, and that just actually the people part just finishes off what we're actually about.
Well, because I guess essentially it is, everything's ends up having that human element to it. Like even with what we do, we sort of tell a lot of people that the newbies to the industry, or that we're building and facility managers, but what we really are is people managers. We're managing people's expectations and and standards and all that sort of thing. But the larger part of it is managing, the dynamic element is the people management, because a building is largely a static object with a few moving parts, and if it was no people in it, there'd be no issues.
Yeah.
Largely, but it is the people side that it's why we're in business, I guess.
Yeah, and I tell people often that we're essentially selling time, and how people spend that time is different for every part of our business. But whether you're a project manager or a cleaner in our organisation, we're still selling your time, and hence people need to be treated with respect and paid on time and paid fairly, and know who they work for and what they're supposed to do. And the plus people part going on after COVID was pretty important to me, because what we did and what we made sure we did wasn't normal for everybody, and that just blew my mind.
Yeah, and you hear the tales of other workplaces, and they sound like they're quite sort of depressing places to work,
and ruthless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's you said before you were doing some, you did a lot of work around planning and that future proofing with the new office and things like that. What do you think the future holds for, firstly for your company, but for the various industries that you're in? Say, are there sort of amazing things coming up with aquatics, or are there new things coming up with project management, or because you just bought like the company down in Palmerston North, FPC.
FPC. Yeah.
What was the sort of the logic behind that? I'll throw 3 questions at you at one time.
Well, I'll start with the new and innovation one.
Yeah.
Look, I don't think, if anything shifts in our industry around property and projects, it'll be where responsibility sits for things. Even now we're finding our compliance and the change to the Health and Safety at Work Act showed that first. Our workload increased dramatically, and yet there was no appetite for a fee increase, and we're spending a lot more of our time and energy as in property and projects around health and safety, but there wasn't a corresponding reflection of that in fees. And so there needs to be, and there should be soon, because there's no getting away from that, and it's important, and it needs to be done properly. And I think that'll be the first thing, that who's responsible for what needs to be tidied up. In terms of aquatics, and that feeds into your last question around FPC, for us that was an opportunity around what we do and closing the supply chain a bit more. If we can work in an industry where we can come up with solutions and then provide the solution, then that's got to be better. Now that presents a little bit of a conflict of interest, but we declare it up front, and the client can make the choice. That's fine.
Totally.
Yeah,
cool. We just got to, now you need to find a place where you can get water from for free, and you'll be start filling up people's water. No, we ship that overseas, don't we? And any major challenges around, I guess the main one at the moment seems to be materials for the building industry, essentially. Have you guys found that, but have you found any other sort of like hurdles that have come out of the COVID time?
I think the key one is people. There's an interesting position for a lot of people about work and work ethic and what work means to them now, and some of that's positive and some of it's negative. The positive part is that around that whole individual work method or shorter work weeks. I think that's going to be good, because you can't work manically for your whole career and then hope to have a happy retirement. I think that that's one. The other is really around, and we're not there yet, around how long things take and how they should be done. I'm expecting that there'll be a shift in the next year or so about how things are achieved. I think is really it, and that's where long-term businesses with good reputations who get stuff done will shine because of that, and that's about navigating what the next couple of years looks like.
And so in your space, you're be considered a long-term business, 16 years?
I think so. It's funny, I don't see us as a big business, but I talk to people who think that we are. When I interview someone, they say things like, I wanted to come and work for a bigger business, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But that's because I've been in it since there were 2 of us.
That's right.
1.5 of us. And now there's about 140 of us. So it's I have to get my head around that a little bit.
Well, that's a massive. So like when you first started off, like firstly there was yourself, and then another person, and another person. Did you ever think there'd be 140 of you at some stage?
I always did.
Yeah, yeah, classic, nice, typical Kris thinking.
Yeah. I always did. That's why we rented the big space before we need it, and we've done that every step of the way.
So do you want 300 people? Or?
I've always said double when we were at 100, so a couple of hundred.
Yeah. The other thing too I was going to talk about before was that you're largely based in Auckland, but you've got operations around the country too. So where else are you?
So currently in Tauranga and Palmerston North.
Yep.
And out of Tauranga we do aquatics and project management, and we're angling for some property work there. Palmerston North is the head office for FPC, and of course that will reciprocate in terms of FPC having a small presence in Auckland, which is where the opportunity sits, and we deliver some of the FPC work for the Waikato Bay of Plenty region out of Tauranga.
South Island?
Not yet,
but that's the plan. Set up shop down there.
Yeah, at some point.
Would it be another another Auckland operation? Would it be something more specific?
I think it'll depend what the first opportunity looks like, and that will then drive. Because I live in the Bay, when we moved there, I said it would take 5 years to get a presence, and it was almost to the day that we got our first big project, and that was 5 years of the odd meeting with a potential client, talking to people, dropping a few seeds, and mostly me doing my Auckland work from our Tauranga office, and then now we're running currently $45 million worth of work. Not all our money, but we're running that sort of value work out of there now. So with a couple of full-time and me part-time. So it's slow growth, and you have to plan well ahead for it.
Play the long game, eh?
Yeah, very much so.
So would you like to be anywhere else in the country? Like, do you sort of just keep your eye on various things, or you keep your ear to the ground with all these other things that you tender for? Do you sort of think, oh shit, we should do that, or we could go to this part of the country? Or?
Yeah, and we've tendered for work that we've missed out on that's remote from where we are, and I think that's a real positive outcome from COVID, is you don't need to meet face to face. I mean, we've done a lot of work in schools all over the North Island in the last year with only 1 or 2 site visits and a lot of online meetings. Now, it doesn't mean we're never going to be on the ground, but people are a lot more accepting of a remote contractor, as long as you're prepared to drive or fly there when you need to, and that's a real positive shift. Previously it was, they're Auckland based, or they're from Tauranga, so they, I've always driven to a client over the Kaimais to work, or up north, or whatever it might be, and that until you have a economy of scale, then you set up a base, and then the doors typically open a bit more. Oh, that's cool. I hope you guys end up in the South Island at some stage. I'm sure they'd benefit from your experience down there. Yeah, well, that's the thing though. You go back to the procurement rules. You got to be present to win a job in a lot of cases for where we work. So, if you don't have a local office, you're on the last rung of approvals. So, a little bit chicken or egg.
And so, just finally, I tend to ask this question just to try and catch people off guard a wee bit. It's nothing major. But if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what do you think you'd be doing?
Probably your job.
Sitting here talking shit.
Look, I think I'd be... Look, I left my last full-time employment because I was getting bored. It was Groundhog Day. I'd achieved what I needed to achieve, and it would have been quite easy just to stay there and take the salary and flatline. And in hindsight, that's never really been what I've done. So I'd be doing something similar but different, if that makes sense. I think I'd always destined to be in charge of my own path.
Property related, do you think?
Perhaps. I mean, the thing for me is, it goes back to what I said at the beginning around systems and processes. I have a uncanny knack or ability to see something and work out how to describe and write down how someone else can do it. And that's essentially what our business started on.
So you actually didn't answer my question.
It'd be same but different.
Same but different. Sweet. Okay, so you can pick any industry.
I wouldn't. Well, when I say any industry, it'd be something that the beauty of property and every part of it that we work in is that there's something solid to work with. Look, as much as we've got that many staff, I wouldn't say I was not a people person, but the unknowns of how people are means I wouldn't run a business that didn't have some firm foundation of of structure or being. Turning up every day and not knowing what was going to happen or what we need to do would drive me bonkers.
Do you think, because I guess the way that your business has grown over the years, somewhat organically, somewhat with acquisitions and things, which is really smart. Do you think there's other potential services that you can still add, with that you were talking before about FPC and closing that the chain? What do you say?
Supply chain. Yeah.
Supply chain. Are there still other opportunities out there with what you're doing?
Frustrates my wife and my exec team massively that I'm always looking. Yeah.
But you got to be the one pushing that stuff, right?
Yeah, that's my job.
That's your job.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And with the people shortage at the moment, I'm getting down into the weeds a bit much, doing things for clients, which I'm happy to do. You got to do it, but that takes my eye off the what are we doing next year ball, which is really what my job is. How do we fill that gap? Is everyone going to have a job plus a few more next year? We've got a long lease and a big premises. How are we going to fill it up? And then that also has a view to what does retirement look like. Every part of what we do is connected, and that's where the value is. And we've certainly had a lot of discussion about focusing on one thing or being diverse, and it's proven that diversity has paid off. Yeah, very much so.
And so is that do you also carry that over into your workplace and the way that you hire staff as well?
Oh yeah, fully. I mean, I read with interest stories about where the gender pay gap, and hand on heart, I've never once walked out in an interview and said if we pay her, we'll be able to pay her a bit less. It just blows my mind that that's even a conversation.
Yeah, it's stunning thing.
Yeah, I just don't get it, and I think that's a generational thing. And there's few years between you and I, but we're of the same generation, and it's just not how we think. And I think, regrettably, it'll just take time for that other generation to be weaned out. It's just not something we talk about. And likewise, culture or race, for want of a better word.
It's actually a good point, and I'll ask you about that. So, culture and values wise, do you guys have a set of values in the business that you all subscribe to, and what are they?
Yeah, well, we have a phrase that people raise their eyebrows at, which is just be naked. And there's a business book that I give to everybody after about 30 days. I have a chat with them, see how they're going, make sure that what we said we're doing, and that they're enjoying it, and it's as we described. And I also give them this book and say, this is for you. If you read it, you'll understand how we want our whole team to work. And that's really about be honest with each other, be honest with the clients, good or bad. If you muck up, say so, and we'll sort it out. Don't brush it under the carpet. Don't, mixing my metaphors, don't throw anyone under the bus. Own it, and we can sort it. And front foot it. If there's a problem, tell the client and we'll fix it. It's when we pretend it didn't happen or we make up stories that we get in trouble. And that being naked is a really strong way to work at home and at work. And if you get it, you get it. I had somebody resign after a couple of months because they didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that we would raise something that wasn't quite right, but they were happy to hear the positives. And it's like, well, with the positive comes the negative. If we don't deal with the negative, we're not going to learn from it or get better or fix it. And that's just how it is. It's not about being offensive. It's about saying, this is a problem, we need to fix it.
Being honest.
Yeah.
And you got a question there, morals and values and ethics as well, if they don't like hearing the bad news.
Yeah, it was, and their issue was it got raised in front of others, and it wasn't about making someone look like a failure or they got something wrong. It's just like, no, we've got to do it like this. And you can't have one without the other. And clients, we've found the more honest we are with our clients about something going wrong, the better the response and the more trust there is between us.
That little 30-day catch-up that you do, that's a bloody great idea. You must get a good reaction out of that, especially when you hand over the book. Do people go, oh, that's really cool? Or has anyone sort of gone, well, don't want the book on?
No, because I sort of, the book part is last in that talk. So it's like, how's it going? Are you enjoying it? Is everything we've done, said we do, happening? Oh, and I usually get pretty good feedback. It's only a month. But it's the book is it's a and I say to people, you could read this on a sunny Saturday afternoon lying on the sofa. It's not intense. It's an easy read. Scribble all over it. Remember one or two things, and you're fine. Yeah. So it's always received positively. Yeah.
That's cool. Did you write the book?
No.
Do you think you'd ever write a book?
No.
Why not? You'd have some good stories to tell around what you do.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd be worthy of a book. Maybe we'll see in a few years' time.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Sweet.